When a simple errand becomes a statement, some stories don't begin with a bang. They begin with something ordinary, a routine, a habit, a quiet assumption that the day will go just as planned. For Danielle Harper, a successful tech entrepreneur and longtime client of Southern Heights Bank, that's exactly how this story began. A regular Thursday, a familiar branch, and a planned withdrawal for a new business venture. She walked in with purpose, dressed with precision and confidence in every step. What she expected was a transaction. What she got was a confrontation, not just with a bank's biased protocol, but with a system that still couldn't see a black woman as the rightful owner of wealth, success, and status. This is the story of how one woman's dignity met one institution's prejudice, and how a single phone call changed everything. And as you'll see, by the time we return to where we began, Danielle standing at that teller window, everything will have shifted. A routine visit with big plans, the late afternoon sun filtered through the towering glass windows of Southern Heights Bank as Danielle Harper stepped confidently through its double doors. The place smelled of polished tile and air conditioned control. For Danielle, this was supposed to be a quick, mundane errand, one she'd done countless times before, but today was different. She had just finalized a multi-million-dollar tech deal, and she needed to withdraw $35,000 to jumpstart a new project. She wasn't just any customer, she was a loyal client with over a decade of history at this very branch. Wearing a tailored blazer and a calm, commanding presence, Danielle was the picture of modern success. She greeted the teller with a pleasant smile, her checkbook and ID in hand. To her, this moment was about growth, investment, progress. What she didn't know was that her routine stop was about to turn into a calculated display of doubt, where her confidence would be mistaken for audacity and her identity quietly questioned. Suspicion behind the smile as Danielle approached the counter, the young teller, Colby, looked up. His customer service smile twitched ever so slightly as he caught sight of her request. 35,000, he asked, repeating the number with a pause. She nodded, unfazed. Yes, I called yesterday. They said it would be ready. Colby's eyes flicked from her ID to her face and back again, then narrowed at his screen. He typed a few keys, then hesitated. I'm going to need to get some approvals, just a moment. Without waiting for her reply, he disappeared behind the swinging door. Danielle felt it, the shift in air, the moment of unspoken suspicion. The nearby tellers slowed their motions, stealing glances. The security guard adjusted his stance. A subtle tension filled the space, not loud or hostile, but chillingly familiar. In that moment, Danielle wasn't a client, she wasn't a business leader, she was a question mark, and that question was being asked with quiet scrutiny and doubting eyes. A slow freeze behind glass walls. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Danielle, still standing at the counter, began to feel like a statue, unmoving, unnoticed, and increasingly unwelcome. She could sense it now beyond doubt. This wasn't about bank policy anymore. It was about perception. Colby finally returned, but not alone. He was now flanked by a woman with sharp heels, sharper eyes, and a clipped tone. Ms. Harper, the woman said, I'm Marla, assistant branch manager. We'll need to verify a few more things before we can process your transaction. Danielle furrowed her brow. I've already provided my ID and account information. What else do you need? Marla gave a rehearsed smile. It's just for your protection. Large withdrawals often trigger extra steps. Extra steps, Danielle thought, that somehow never applied to the white man in a hoodie she saw withdraw a similar amount last week. Marla gestured toward a side office. If you could step in here, please. And just like that, a simple transaction became a silent interrogation. Questions masked as doubts. The glass-walled office offered no privacy, only a clearer view of how everyone outside was now watching her. Danielle sat with her back straight as Marla placed a clipboard down, already holding forms and a checklist of security questions. What was the last purchase made with your debit card? Can you list the last 5 deposits? Do you know the routing number tied to your business account? Danielle answered them all, calmly, accurately. Still, Marla's smile didn't fade, and neither did her doubt. We'll also need to wait for internal approval from our fraud team. She added, it's just policy. Danielle's patience wore thin. Policy or profiling? She asked, her voice steady but edged with steel. Outside the office, another teller whispered to a coworker. The security guard, still watching, tapped his radio. Danielle looked down at her watch. She had been here over 40 minutes, all for accessing her own money. She wasn't being protected. She was being treated like a criminal, and the only thing she'd done was walk in black, confident, and successful. Calm in the face of contempt, Danielle sat motionless in the frosted glass office, legs crossed, phone resting face down beside her. Around her, Marla and another associate spoke in hushed tones as if discussing a potential breach rather than a client. And still, Danielle kept her composure. She knew this playbook. The microaggressions, the strategic delays, the subtle power plays, they weren't new. They were simply cloaked in policy. Are you sure this is your account? The junior banker asked next, pretending curiosity. Danielle turned her gaze to him, calm and deliberate. I'm certain. In fact, I created it myself over 10 years ago. She didn't yell. She didn't storm out. She didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her flustered, because she knew who she was, and more importantly, she knew who they didn't realize she was. Injustice had a rhythm, and Danielle could hear it thudding louder by the minute. And that's when she decided it was time, not to fight louder, but to play smarter. The number that could melt ice without a word, Danielle reached into her purse, slow and unthreatening. She unlocked her phone, thumb swiping across the screen with purpose, and tapped a name saved under one emoji, Marcus. She lifted the phone to her ear. Marla blinked, shifting uncomfortably. Ma'am, we ask that. I'm not taking pictures. Danielle interrupted, her voice calm as steel. I'm making a call. The line rang once, twice, then answered Danielle. A smooth, powerful voice echoed, Marcus. She said coolly, the bank is refusing to release my money. I think it's time. There was a pause. Then Marcus replied with just 3 words, give me 90. She ended the call, placed her phone on the table like a queen laying down her final card, and folded her hands. Marla stood frozen. Who was that? Danielle looked her dead in the eye. Someone you should have greeted at the door with a smile instead of suspicion. The power behind the voice, it didn't even take 90 seconds. Before Marla could mutter another excuse or Colby could type another keystroke, the office door flew open. The air shifted. In walked Jonathan Blake, the branch manager, face flushed, collar unbuttoned, panic in every step. MS Hopper, he gasped. So sorry for the delay, there's been a miscommunication. Behind him, Marla's posture shrank. She now looked like a child caught cheating on a test. Jonathan extended his hand, the weight of his urgency unmistakable. We were just contacted by Marcus Ellington, our chairman at corporate. He made it very clear who you are and how you're to be treated moving forward. The room fell silent. Danielle raised one eyebrow, arms still folded. Oh, now you recognize me, Jonathan fumbled. Well, this was a breakdown in our internal protocols, and no. She said, standing slowly, it was a breakdown in your perception. And with that, the entire branch seemed to realize the storm they'd just walked into. A queen's reckoning Danielle stood tall, graceful, composed, and absolutely commanding. She turned toward Marla and Colby, her voice calm but resonant, echoing just enough to reach the stunned staff and customers beyond the glass. You didn't question me because of my ID, she began. You questioned me because in your eyes a black woman like me, dressed professionally, confident, asking for her own money, doesn't fit the picture of wealth or authority. Neither Marla nor Colby spoke. Their silence was loud. I've been banking here for 10 years. You didn't bother to check the history, the calls made, the account notes. You saw me and you assumed fraud before you even saw the truth. Her eyes swept the room. I don't need your apology. What I need is change, because I'm not the first to be treated this way, but I damn sure won't let myself be the last. And with those words, Danielle turned, leaving behind not just stunned silence, but the sound of everything shifting grace in her exit, fire in her footsteps. The automatic doors of the bank slid open, and Danielle stepped out, not defeated, but empowered, leaving behind whispers and shameful stares. The silence in the room was louder than any outcry. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like a gavel hitting wood. The same people who once looked at her with suspicion now looked at her with stunned respect, or perhaps regret. Even the security guard who had monitored her like a threat now shifted his eyes away, guilt washing over his face. She didn't need their words. Her dignity had spoken louder than their assumptions. In her car, her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus: handled, board has been notified. They're launching an internal review tomorrow. You didn't just make noise, you made change. Danielle smiled faintly. Because in that moment, she wasn't just a woman who walked away with her money. She walked away having rewritten the narrative they had tried to write for her. Grace in her exit, fire in her footsteps, the automatic doors of the bank slid open, and Danielle stepped out, not defeated but empowered, leaving behind whispers and shameful stares. The silence in the room was louder than any outcry. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like a gavel hitting wood. The same people who once looked at her with suspicion now looked at her with stunned respect, or perhaps regret. Even the security guard who had monitored her like a threat now shifted his eyes away, guilt washing over his face. She didn't need their words. Her dignity had spoken louder than their assumptions. In her car, her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus: handled, board has been notified. They're launching an internal review tomorrow. You didn't just make noise, you made change. Danielle smiled faintly. Because in that moment, she wasn't just a woman who walked away with her money. She walked away having rewritten the narrative they had tried to write for her. A storm that leaves no mess, only meaning. As the sun dipped low over the Atlanta skyline, Danielle sat in her car, watching the bank fade in her rearview mirror. She wasn't angry, not anymore. She was something far stronger, clear. Clear on who she was, clear on what had happened, clear on what would happen next. Not just for her, but for every person who walked through those doors after her, because storms don't always roar. Some roll in quietly, break apart broken systems, and then leave the air clearer than before. Danielle had been that storm, silent, strong, and undeniable. And while the bank staff may forget her name, they would never forget that day. The day a black woman refused to shrink, made one call, and changed everything. Because respect, like justice, sometimes only needs one moment, one voice, and one unshakable truth. Not just a withdrawal, a wake-up call. Danielle didn't just walk out of a bank that day. She walked out having pulled more than money. She had pulled back the curtain. She showed that calm can carry power, silence can strike louder than screams, and dignity in the face of profiling is a revolution on its own. The bank would go on, policies would change, trainings would be revised. But the real transformation wasn't in documents, it was in perception. And that shift began the moment Danielle refused to doubt herself, even when everyone else in that room did. Because some people go to the bank to withdraw cash, Danielle Harper walked in and withdrew change, and now, every time someone like her walks through those same doors, they'll be seen differently. Not because the system changed itself, but because one woman demanded that it must.